welcome everyone to episode 95 of Today in the Scene. I'm Joe with the Indie Arcade Wave, and I just want to say thank you for checking us out. If you like what we're doing here, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us a ton, just keeps it growing, keeps the wave going, and all that fun stuff. So this week we're going to be kind of on the topic of Killer Queen. So before we jump into it, I want you to comment down below where you first found Killer Queen and why you continue to play the game, what you love about it so much. So this week's guest is Rob. He's part of the Three Flip Studios development team, and he made Influent as well as Armed and Gelatinous. He recently moved from the East Coast to the West Coast. Now he's living in Portland and has been diving into the Killer Queen scene like crazy there. He recently just took a huge trip all the way across country to play Killer Queen at a whole bunch of different arcades and meet the communities. So we're going to talk to him about what that was like. How you doing, Rob?
Hey, what's up? I'm doing good. How are you, Joe?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm glad you're on here. I got to see you during this trip, which was pretty cool. Unfortunately,
That's
we
right.
did not get to play KQ, but
I
it
know.
happens. But let's just have you reintroduce yourself for anybody that doesn't know who you are.
Yeah, sure. My name's Rob Howland. I got into game development after college. I was fortunate enough to receive a scholarship to go to Japan and do research into video games there, where I taught myself to program and ended up making a language learning game as part of my research project there. After that, I brought it to Kickstarter. It made like $30,000. I was able to quit my job at an iPhone game company there and bring it to market. It did really well, and I reinvested that into a skate shop that was in Japan, and also a new game, Armed and Gelatinous, which is now in arcades across the US, which is how I know Joe. So yeah, here I am.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good wrap up of kind of what you've done, what you've been through. We've been to a couple conventions together. We've hung out a handful of times. But I'm curious about this trip. So we're talking KQ, the
Yeah,
scene, everything that's developed with it. Why did you take this trip?
it was out of necessity, really. I had to get my car back from Connecticut, where it was. It had been there since the pandemic. I initially drove it out to Connecticut from Los Angeles when I moved back to Connecticut to build arcades. And my plan in March 2020 was to finish up PAX East and then drive it back across country and stop at a whole bunch more arcades and make a bunch more arcade sales. And we all know how that went. So my car has been there for years, and I don't know, I just like needed it now that I had relocated to Portland. So I had initially hired a shipping company to go grab it, and they just like didn't pick it up for a month. So I was kind of pulling my hair out without my vehicle and was like, I'm just going to drive it. So I ended up flying back and packing it full of a bunch of computer equipment and arcade building stuff, including a drill press. And like I had barely no room in the vehicle, even for another passenger. And then set out to hit every arcade along the way on my way out to Portland. So yeah, the journey itself lasted about 2 weeks, and I think I hit like close to 10 arcades and played Killer Queen with countless people and made a ton of friends along the way. It was sick.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely sounded like fun. I know we were talking for a couple days, so you could come meet me, and you got to see some arcades in the Midwest, which you had never seen, like IO. I know that that's one. I mean, I love IO.
Oh yeah,
But
place is amazing.
what made you want to stop at all these arcades and play Killer Queen? Like you had the option to just go get your car and just make it a quick trip.
Yeah, I guess it's the fact that I wasn't gonna do this again. In my mind, it was like, okay, I have to do this out of necessity. I want to make a bunch of memories out of it and have a good time and see places I probably won't see, because I won't have another reason to be in those places. So I tried to, along my route, hit as many major cities and arcades as I possibly could fit in within the time frame because I had to get back to work. And yeah, I managed to really make it worth the trip, and didn't really miss out on anything. So I feel like mission accomplished.
So you said you got to see all these different arcades. Like which scene for you specifically stood out the most, and why did that scene stand out to you?
Wow, that's a great question. Which scene stood out the most? I keep coming back to Ohio. Like Ohio to me has something really special going on, and I saw this on my first road trip too. It was on the way from LA to Connecticut. We went through Columbus, not really knowing what we would find, and we came across this place called Close Quarters Social Gaming Lounge, and it was essentially a clubhouse built around Killer Queen. And they had a Killer Queen in there, they had a death ball in there, and all this art on the wall that was like custom fan art for both of those games. And they had like a streamer studio set up so that they could stream the Killer Queen cabs on a stage and do like their winter cluster tournament there. And just the place was a dream. I still can't get over it. Unfortunately, the pandemic killed it, and it's gone, and it's very sad. Um, but still, the scene lives on. They have their cabs at an arcade there called Level One. It's a really cool arcade bar there in Columbus, and the people are wonderful. And they're also just a stone's throw away from Cincinnati, which also has a robust scene, with another new arcade there called Wonderland, I think. Wondercade, sorry. And Wondercade is sick. And the the way the cabs are set up there is really interesting. They're not back to back. They're actually like spread apart and they're facing each other. And they have like a homemade umbilical cord that connects them. And it's a really cool space there as well. But what's neat is that they can cross pollinate and they play a lot with each other. And so that whole scene like really interests me. And everyone in the scene was like really wonderful. So I think like, yeah, out of every scene that I saw along the way, Columbus and the Cincinnati connection was like pretty strong. Not to mention, they are a stone's throw away from Indianapolis, and they have a relatively new Killer Queen in their arcade at Tappers. Tappers is unbelievably cool. Like their whole layout reminds me a lot of IO Bar. And they have this like new Killer Queen, and the scene is just starting to pick up there, and they're close enough to Cincinnati and Columbus that they can cross pollinate there too. So there's really like this kind of trifecta going on over there. Um, yeah, it's really something special in the Midwest.
Yeah, I think that's such a cool thing with those scenes being really close, and a lot of these indie games actually come out of the Midwest, which is kind of an interesting thing to see. With the exception of Killer Queen, which is like New York, you guys were more like West Coast. Like everybody else is kind of right in the middle. Um, so it's a good area to be in. But you said you visited a bunch of arcades. Curious as to which was your favorite arcade, not for like the indies or anything, but like what arcade was like, this is one that I wish was in my hometown.
Yeah, it's a tough call. I mean, you mentioned IO Bar earlier, and that is really high on the list. I think that might actually be it, not just for the arcade itself, but for the whole vibe from the scene. Hilton, who is the cab owner there, was super cool. Really enjoyed hanging out with him. Madison is a fantastic town. I really didn't expect that. I just kind of had some preconceived notions about Wisconsin. I got to Madison. I was like, this place fucking rules. Like, unbelievably cool. And then, I made my way out towards Nebraska, ended up in Omaha, and Beercade 2 is pretty high up on that list as well. I mean, that place has some incredible games in there, and I know that you've done like a whole deep dive on Beercade 2 in a previous episode, and it's like 100% true. The place is amazing. The people who run it are super cool. They're into Killer Queen and play with the community, which is super important. And they are just wonderful people. And not to mention Josh Eklow's there too. So it's just like a whole fantastic scene out in Omaha. Definitely worth mentioning. So I'd say, yeah, it's a toss up between those two. It's hard to choose just one.
Which that to me is really interesting. I've been to both those arcades. I've talked to both of the owners and people that hang out at the arcades, and you wouldn't think that the Midwest really has like such cool arcades, but we get snow here, so you got to have something to do in the winter, and an arcade is a perfect place to go.
They're they're
I'm gonna
really
link all those in the up in the top so you guys can see those episodes too.
they're really unique in the design and the games they have and the quality of the games. They're well kept. What I really liked about Beercade too, especially, was like the seating that they had kind of right over by the Killer Queen that kind of like looks like arcade cabinets, but they're like seats with tables.
That was really cool. Yeah, it was like an arcade cabinet, but like it's a bench inside instead of having the play field and the screen there.
Yeah, custom built,
Yeah.
like really special stuff like that. Those little attention that attention to detail matters. In terms of like a social space. So yeah, I really appreciated that and really just liked what I found in those towns. Yeah. And I mean, Logan is also amazing. It's definitely worth mentioning as like one of the most, I don't know, like one of the top tier arcades in the country. Um, but I guess like everybody knows that. So I wanted to mention some other arcades that are probably less known.
Yeah, I mean, Logan's been around since the beginning of KQ. Like when we spoke with Josh Ecklo, like he pretty much told us how Chicago was the reason that the scene continued and grew, and then New York came back into the scene, and it was a whole thing. But I mean, Logan is such a big pivotal point in the Killer Queen scene. Um,
Yeah. And in
what do you
arcades in general, like
right?
pinball too. Like they have some of the bigger pinball tournaments there as well. I mean, that place, the pinballs that they have and the Killer Queen with like the custom marquee from all the tournaments they've won.
Right.
It's just it's something to behold.
Well,
Yeah.
and Stern Pinball is in Chicago, and they demo most of their games in Logan. So
Oh,
they
that's
get like
right.
the
That's so
first
cool.
first look at like all the new Stern games, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Um,
Love that. I guess I have to keep going. Like Wonderville in New
yeah.
York
Oh
is
my.
so
That's the indie
special.
spot. Yeah.
Like there's nothing like it. I mean, nothing could possibly be like Wonderville. It's just this really unique set of games. I mean, they're not played or found anywhere else. A lot of them are just like prototype units. And I think the only two or three games in there that exist anywhere else is Armed and Gelatinous, Killer Queen, obviously, and then Foiled, which only has one other unit in like Charlotte. So, yeah, I mean, if you're looking for something new and super interesting, like, yeah, Wonderville's the place to go for that too.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool speaking to them that they had all those prototypes. They built prototypes for people, and then so many of their games are one-offs from local developers. It's not even like across the country. It's like people in Brooklyn built these
Yeah,
games,
yeah.
and I thought that was such a cool story there. But every
Oh,
road trip has
Whale Food has a second cab. I just realized they put one up in Happy Beacon, um, or Happy. I think it's called the Happy Beacon in like Beacon, New York, up in
oh
upstate. Yeah, they built a second cab and put one up there too. So Kung Fu Kickball's got two.
oh yeah, Kung Fu Football too.
Yeah.
Every road trip has a curveball. There's something that happens, flat tire or whatever ends up happening, that catches you off guard. And what was it that caught you off guard the most? And how did you resolve that issue?
Oh, right. Yeah, I think it was really smooth sailing in terms of the drive. Like I didn't have any car trouble. I didn't have any run-ins with the police. I didn't have any sort of issues that I was like really hoping not to have. But what did end up happening is when I was in Chicago and on my way to Madison, I was in touch with my friend Kevin John back here in Portland, who has worked very closely with Abby, the developer of Hivemind, which is sort of a stats tracking system on the back end of Killer Queen. And a lot of scenes have been adopting it using a Raspberry Pi that's like seated in the cabinet and kind of reroutes the statistics to a server that she runs and is able to, track stats with everyone. And Madison's scene wasn't yet online. And so when I was talking with Kevin, we were like, "Oh, we should have like thought to put a few scenes online on the way." And I was like, "I can still do it." And it resulted in me trying to find a Raspberry Pi in a supply chain nightmare where all of them have been purchased by scalpers that are flipping them on eBay, and they're like $200 when they're supposed to be 30. So it was like, oh no, this is not going to happen. I mean, I was at Micro Center for like an hour trying to scrounge up something that could replace this Raspberry Pi, and I couldn't figure it out. And so I was about to give up, but then we found someone in the scene in Madison who just had one lying around, and they were like, "Oh, I'll donate it." So we were like, "Oh, sweet." So I got to Madison, recovered the Raspberry Pi, um, and I got in super late, and I hadn't sussed out any sort of lodging for the evening, and I quickly hopped on Airbnb and there was like one place available. So I did the instant book thing on it, and they sent me an email saying to go to the address and punch in the code that they sent me. And I looked everywhere for a code and they just like didn't send me a code. And so I was sitting in this parking lot out in the middle of Madison somewhere on the phone with Airbnb customer support at like 1 in the morning trying to get into this Airbnb, and they were taking forever. I think I was there in the parking lot from like midnight until 2 in the morning on customer service. And so while I was waiting for them, I had my phone tethered to my laptop and I was downloading and talking to Kevin about how to set up this Raspberry Pi with Hivemind. And I was like getting it all partitioned and ready in my car until 2 in the morning, and then went finally into the Airbnb when they woke up the host and sent me the code. And then I'm sitting in the Airbnb just like till 5 in the morning getting this Raspberry Pi running so that I could the next day get it installed in the cab. And even then ran into issues while the whole scene was playing Killer Queen and I was like meant to like play with them. I spent most of that evening sitting at a table next to the cab and hiding out behind the cab, troubleshooting this thing until right in the last 30 minutes got it working and was able to play a few games before they closed the bar. So that was pretty hectic, but got it up and running.
Yeah, I mean, you
Yeah.
eventually fixed it. It took a lot of work, and you had to deal with a lot of stuff. But now they've got Hive, so that's
Yeah.
definitely a good thing. What? Tell us a little bit more about Hive and what it is.
So it tracks all of the statistics that are happening in the game and sends them to a server, which then stores them. And what's cool about that is that Abby's created all these like achievements that you can unlock. So when you get a kick in and it's the last berry, you get an achievement called Pele. Or if you play 100 games on a cab with the same user, you get like BFFs and you both unlock an achievement for having played 100 games together and stuff like that. It's like really fascinating statistics and achievements. And what's cool about it is there's like a whole graph that compares the scenes nationally, so you can see which cabinets gets the most play and how often they get played and what win conditions are winning the most and what maps are most popular, et cetera, et cetera. So there's like really interesting statistics out there on Hivemind that you can just kind of check out at kqhivemind.com. And then using that same platform, my friend Kevin John out here in Portland has also created this fantastic overlay that utilizes Hivemind as a platform to display real-time in-game events as they happen for tournaments. And it connects to OBS and displays on Twitch in an overlay, and it's like the coolest thing I've ever seen. Like it's basically like an ESPN overlay where they show the scorers and stuff, but this is like showing in real time how many warriors are up, how many gates are controlled by which team, how many berries are in, what's the snail progress, how many queen kills are there. So you can see all of that in this nice little compact area. And it also has these fancy animations anytime the queen dies, and it shows who killed them. If they're logged in, it'll actually use their username for their profile of like who killed who. It's so cool. Like I can't say enough about it. You can check that out at kq.style, I believe. And yeah, it's just like free. He put it out there. Any scene can download and install it, and it kind of just works out of the box in OBS. It's super cool. The other cool thing is that it integrates with Challenge and will pull down the team names. So if you're trying to do commentary on like a KQ tournament or something, like it'll update all of the team names automatically from the Challenge. So yeah, there's a lot of really fancy features in this thing. And I think right now he's working on some sort of way to like get instant replays or something, but don't I don't think he wanted me to say that.
Well, I mean, that's a pretty cool feature to have, and it's cool that the scene is so involved in helping evolve the game and make the competitive scene really what it is. You mentioned already, like, all the arcades you visited and everything, but who did you visit? Like, what individual people were you like, oh, well, I'm in this city, I want to go see them? Like,
Oh
whatever.
yeah. So in New York, I hit up Gyro, and that was really cool because Gyro has opened or helped open and start a indie video game collective in Brooklyn. Well, it's actually in Dumbo, down under the Manhattan Bridge overpass or something, and like the name of their collective is Gumbo for Games Under the Manhattan Bridge Overpass. And it's this really amazing space that they acquired during the pandemic for super cheap. And they have like all these indies in there that are making all these really cool games. They've got a few like triple I studios in there that have like made that their kind of workspace in a separate room. And they've got a lot going on with like the local government too. I think the mayor of New York invited them to like talk about games, and they have like local educational institutions that are working with them to bring kids on field trips and show them what making video games is like. It's like really, really cool stuff. And I was blown away by it. There's some really great people in there too, like the guy who makes Kung Fu Kickball from Whale Food. His name is escaping me. He's in there, and the guy who makes Skate Story, also a really cool skateboarding video game thing coming out, published by Devolver, also works out of there. So yeah, there's some really cool people in there, and I was just blown away by all of that. And I got to hang out with Gyro and talk Killer Queen for a day or two, so that was super fun. And then on my way, I got to see Spooky, my business partner. He's currently in Philadelphia. Hung out with him for a few days, and then also moved on through to Cincinnati, where I hung out with JC, who's really cool. He's making like a really interesting Killer Queen style game. And he's also working on like an indie arcade cabinet as well. I think it's called Witch Ball or something like that. It's this really creepy game where you're like running through a hallway and you're like playing volleyball at the same time. So you have to like win the race, but you also have to like hit the ball. It's like Pong, but really scary. I don't know how to describe it. The cabinet he's making on the cheap, and he's trying to use like spare parts. So it's like a really cobbled together work of art, let's say. Um, and then he's also working on another game called Hollow Meta, which is a Killer Queen style game with like 3 win conditions. And then there's also up in Chicago, I hit up Woody, got to hang out with him and spend the night, and that was super fun. Woody's like widely regarded as one of the best queens in the scene, if not the best. He won Bumble Bash 4 and was also one of the first people to teach me Killer Queen at a newbie tournament in Chicago on this first arcade road trip. Thanks, Woody. And I also got to hang out with Belia in Chicago, another member of the Bumble Bear team who now works at Jackbox Games, and she was on her way to TwitchCon in Amsterdam, which was really cool because I got to introduce her to my friend Mary, who works at Twitch, and they had a good time out in Amsterdam like a week after I was there. So that was really interesting. And then after that, I got to see you in Minnesota. That was a cool stopover. Thanks, by the way, for introducing me to that awesome lunch place. What was it called?
Pizza Luce.
Yeah, Pizza Luce. The place was great. And then, yeah, Josh Ecklo out in Omaha. Super cool. And like, what was fascinating about that was that Josh kind of just piped up in the Discord, like, hey, if you're coming through Omaha, you can stay with me. And I was like, cool, yeah, what's up? And so ended up like meeting him at Beercade 2. We played games all night, and then he was like, yeah, come crash at mine. I went back to his, hung out, got to like talk all about Killer Queen, and he has some fascinating stuff and stories. And then I hit the road, and then that day that I was driving out to like Cheyenne or something, I popped on Indie Arcade Wave to listen to a few of the recent episodes, and then sure enough, there's an episode with Josh Ecklo, and I was like, wait, I just stayed with this dude last night. And so I listened to that episode and learned a whole lot more about him. So that was really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you got to see some cool people. You got to see some cool arcades, play some games. How did this trip wrap up? Like, tell us a little bit about the Emerald City Classic and what that was like.
Right. Yeah. So the timing of that was really interesting because I was on my way through Cheyenne, which is like 7 hours from Omaha, and then another 7 hours to Salt Lake. And I get to Salt Lake, and everyone had COVID, so there was no games to be had. It was an unfortunate time. So I decided to kind of just press on through Boise and get back to Portland. Initially, my plan was to go to San Francisco, but I had taken long enough to get out there. So I was like, I got to get home and I can get to San Francisco pretty easily from here anytime. And then the Emerald City Classic was coming up. And so pretty soon after getting back, I had formed a team and we drove up to Seattle. And that was a super cool time because this was my first Killer Queen travel tournament. I'm like a new queen in the scene here in Portland, and I've been cutting my teeth playing against some of the best queens and best speed warriors and players in the scene, like nationally. So it's been really nice to kind of like have my skill just go like this. I still suck, but it has been really cool to play against some of the best people for like weeks and weeks and weeks. So I was like, yeah, why not? Let's go play in a tournament. So I formed a team and we went up to the ECC and it was amazing. It was like 3 days of just awesome people, amazing games from like all parts of the country, bringing their A game to Seattle. And yeah, we got completely destroyed. I think we got last place actually, but we did win one set, which was really nice. So I felt pretty good about that. And we had a couple of other wins, but we lost 1 and 2. So that was an amazing experience, and I met so many cool people. And then the trash games are really what you're there for, right? I mean, just getting through the tournament and then just playing with everybody there. I highly recommend anybody who hasn't gone to a travel tournament, just do that. Don't even join a team. Just go and play trash games once everyone's done with the tournament because, wow, I still can't get over how good they were. And a lot of them are like on Twitch too. Like they recorded everything and put it out there too. So if you're really a Killer Queen nerd like me, you can go and watch them and freak out because they're good.
Yeah, I mean that sounds awesome, and I completely agree with your recommendation. Whether you're good or not, you just enjoy the game. Go to these tournaments because we went. Dylan Kelly and I found a couple other people to be on our team. We played in the Omaha tournament. We won one set. We were super excited about it. Lost everything else.
Yeah.
But that was that one set that we played was or that we won was like the hypest set of the whole tournament because it was two teams that nobody really knew about, and it was super
hmm
close. It went for a long time. Um, but yeah, those are
Damn.
like go to those tournaments, have fun, enjoy it, play the trash games. It's all good. That's really all I had for you, Rob. So you can just wrap up with like
Sweet.
social medias, just let people know where to find you and the stuff that you're working on.
Yeah. Armedandgelatinous.com is our website. Discord.gg/blobs online if you want to join our Discord. And then Armed Gelatinous everywhere else, Twitter, Instagram, what have you. And yeah, that's us.
Awesome. I'm gonna throw some links to the stuff you were talking about the KQ stuff too, like Hive and all that. And yeah, thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the feedback
Totally.
about the podcast and just telling us the story about the trip. And for anybody that's still watching, if you like what we're doing here, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps us a ton, keeps the wave growing. I mean, you are the wave, so we're just trying to build it and ride it with you. But until next time, peace.